The blizzard screamed down from the peaks like a living thing bent on murder, and Zara Renwick knew that if she did not find shelter within the hour, the mountain would claim her bones before sunrise. Ice clung to her eyelashes and the small tusks that curved from her lower jaw, and every breath felt like swallowing knives. The hamlet ahead flickered through the whiteout, tiny points of amber light that promised warmth, food, safety. She stumbled forward, her pack heavy with everything she owned, her fingers numb inside their wrappings. The wind tried to shove her sideways off the trail, but she had survived worse. She had survived the accusations, the exile, the long weeks alone in the high country. She would survive this. The first house turned her away before she could finish speaking. The man who answered the door took one look at her green skin, her pointed ears, her travel-stained cloak, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. She heard the bolt slide home. The second house did not even open. A woman's voice called through the wood that they had no room, no food to spare, and the orc should move along before they set the dogs loose. The third house belonged to the blacksmith, and he at least had the decency to tell her to her face. "You have some nerve showing up here," he said, his breath fogging in the frozen air. "After what your kind did. My brother lost half his herd to that raid, and we all know who led them through the pass." "I did not lead anyone," Zara said, forcing the words through chattering teeth. "I was riding patrol on the eastern ridge when it happened. I reported what I saw and they exiled me for it. Convenient story." The blacksmith crossed his arms. "Find somewhere else to freeze. The fourth house, the fifth, the sixth." Each door opened just wide enough for suspicion to peer out, and each one closed again, leaving her in the storm. The wind howled louder, as if laughing at her. Snow piled against the buildings in drifts taller than a man. The cold had long since stopped hurting. Now it simply made everything slow and heavy, her thoughts thick as honey, her legs clumsy beneath her. She could see the edge of the hamlet now, the last few structures before the wilderness took over again. If none of them took her in, she would have to try to build a shelter in the trees, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would not wake up. The farmhouse sat a little apart from the others, a solid timber structure with smoke rising from the chimney and warm light glowing behind oiled skin windows. A small barn hunched beside it, and she could hear animals moving inside, the soft sounds of chickens settling and a cow lowing. Someone lived here. Someone who might, if the gods had any mercy left, open the door. Zara climbed the 3 steps to the porch and knocked. She waited, swaying slightly, her vision blurring at the edges. Knocked again, harder. The door opened. A man stood there, tall and lean, somewhere in his 30s with dark hair pulled back in a short tail and the kind of weathered face that came from years working outdoors. He looked at her with calm gray eyes, taking in the ice crusted on her clothes, the pack dragging at her shoulders, the way she could barely stand upright. He did not ask who she was, did not ask what she wanted, did not mention the raid or the rumors, or the fact that she was an orc standing on his doorstep in the worst storm in a decade. He simply stepped aside and gestured her in. Zara stared at him, not quite believing. "I can pay," she managed. "Not much, but I can work." "I can inside," he said quietly, "before you freeze." She stumbled over the threshold and the warmth hit her like a wall. Her knees almost buckled. The man closed the door behind her, shutting out the wind's shriek, and for a moment the only sound was the crackle of the fire burning in the stone hearth. The room was simple but well kept. A large table with benches, shelves lined with crockery and preserves, a loom in one corner, a spinning wheel in another. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, and a kettle steamed gently on a hook above the fire. A child's wooden toys lay scattered near the hearth, small carved animals and a rag doll. The man moved past her to a cupboard, pulled out a heavy blanket and draped it over her shoulders. Then he ladled something from a pot on the hearth into a clay mug and pressed it into her shaking hands. Cocoa. The smell of it rose in a sweet, rich cloud, and Zara felt something crack inside her chest. "Sit," the man said, nodding toward the hearth. She sat because her legs would not hold her any longer and wrapped both hands around the mug. The heat of it burned against her frozen fingers, painful and perfect. She sipped, and the cocoa was thick and sweet and faintly spiced with cinnamon, and it was the best thing she had ever tasted. The man did not hover. He moved around the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew his own space, banking the fire a little higher, checking the bolt on the door, setting a pot of water to heat. He did not stare at her, did not ask questions, did not demand explanations. Zara drank her cocoa and felt the warmth begin to seep back into her body, her fingers prickling as blood returned, her toes aching inside her boots. The blanket smelled like pine soap and wood smoke, clean and comforting. After a while, a small face peered around the edge of a doorway at the back of the room. A girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair in 2 braids and her father's gray eyes. She stared at Zara with the unabashed curiosity of childhood, taking in the green skin, the tusks, the pointed ears. "Papa," she whispered, not quietly enough, "there is an orc lady by our fire." "I see that, Macy," the man said, glancing over. "She needed to get out of the storm." "She is very green," Macy observed. "Macy." "It is all right," Zara said, her voice still rough. "I am very green. You are very observant." Macy grinned and padded closer, bare feet silent on the wood floor. She wore a nightgown and had clearly been meant to be asleep, but the excitement of a stranger was too much to resist. "Are you going to stay?" "Just until the storm passes," Zara said. "That might be a few days," the man said. He had crossed to a chest and was pulling out more blankets. "This one came down hard. I am Quinten. This is my daughter, Macy. Zara Renwick. You can sleep by the fire tonight. Tomorrow, if the wind breaks, I will clear a spot in the barn loft. It is warmer than you would think." It was more than she had any right to expect. More than she had hoped for. Zara looked down at her empty mug, at the blanket around her shoulders, at the fire that was slowly thawing the ice from her bones. "Thank you," she said, and her voice cracked on the words. Quinten nodded once, as if it were nothing, as if he had not just saved her life. "Macy, bed. You can talk to our guest in the morning." Macy pouted but obeyed, scampering back to her room after one last long look at Zara. Quinten set the extra blankets beside the hearth, added another log to the fire, and then paused. "There is bread and cheese in the cupboard if you are hungry," he said. "Help yourself." Then he, too, disappeared into the back of the house, leaving Zara alone by the fire. She sat there for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet sounds of the house settling around her. She had expected questions, accusations, suspicion. She had received none of it, and the absence felt almost as overwhelming as the cold had been. Eventually, she pulled the blankets around herself and lay down on the warm stones near the hearth. Sleep came hard and fast, dragging her under before she could think too much about why a human stranger had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than her own clan had in the weeks before they exiled her. When she woke, pale gray light filtered through the windows, and the storm still howled outside. Quinten was already up, moving quietly around the kitchen, and the smell of frying bacon made her stomach cramp with hunger. Macy sat at the table, swinging her legs and watching Zara with bright, curious eyes. "Good morning," Zara said, pushing herself upright, Every muscle in her body ached, but the bone deep cold was gone. "Good morning," Macy chirped. "Papa says you can have breakfast with us." "That is kind of him." Quinten glanced over his shoulder. "There is a basin and water in the corner if you want to wash up. Breakfast in 10 minutes. Zara washed her face and hands, scraped the worst of the ice and grime from her clothes, and joined them at the table. Quinten served bacon, fried eggs, thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, and more of that spiced cocoa. It was a feast, by the standards of the past few weeks, and Zara had to force herself to eat slowly, to not shove it all into her mouth like a starving animal. Quinten ate without speaking, his attention on his plate. Macy, by contrast, chattered happily about everything and nothing. The chickens had laid 4 eggs yesterday. The cow was being stubborn about letting down her milk. There was a mouse living in the barn, and she had named it Sir Whiskers. "Macy," Quinten said mildly, "let our guest eat." "It is all right," Zara said. "I like hearing about Sir Whiskers." Macy beamed. After breakfast, Quinten pulled on a heavy coat and gloves. "I need to check on the animals. You can stay inside where it is warm." "I can help," Zara offered. "I have worked with livestock before." He considered her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. There is a spare coat by the door." The coat was too large, made for someone with Quinten's frame, but it was warm and dry, and Zara wrapped herself in it gratefully. They stepped out into the blizzard together, Quinten leading the way to the barn with the confidence of someone who knew every step by heart. Inside, the barn was dim and musty, filled with the warm smell of animals and hay. The cow lowed a greeting, and the chickens fluttered and clucked in their roost. A pair of goats bleated from their pen, and Zara spotted a sturdy plow horse dozing in a stall at the back. Quinten handed her a bucket. "Fetch water from the pump outside while I milk the cow." They worked in companionable silence, moving around each other with the ease of people who both knew what needed doing. Zara filled buckets, scattered feed for the chickens, forked fresh hay into the stalls. Quinten milked the cow, checked each animal for injury or illness, and repaired a loose board in one of the pens. It felt good to work. To use her hands for something other than fighting or running. To be useful. When they finished and returned to the house, Macy was playing with her wooden animals, lining them up in careful rows and talking to them in a serious, instructive tone. She looked up when they came in, shaking snow from their shoulders. "Did Sir Whiskers behave himself?" she asked. "Did not see him," Quinten said. "He is probably sleeping in the hay." Macy nodded wisely. "Mice sleep a lot." The day passed slowly, the storm showing no sign of breaking. Quinten mended tack at the table, the sharp smell of leather oil filling the room, while Macy drew pictures on a slate, and Zara sat by the fire, carefully cleaning and oiling her own gear. Her bow, her knives, the few pieces of armor she had managed to keep when the clan seized most of her belongings. She caught Quinten watching her once or twice, his gaze thoughtful, but he said nothing. That evening, after Macy had been tucked into bed with a story and a kiss on the forehead, Quinten poured 2 mugs of ale and sat down across from Zara at the table. "You do not have to tell me," he said quietly. "But if you want to, I will listen." Zara stared at the foam on her ale. She had not talked about it, not really, since the morning the elders had pronounced their judgment and told her to leave and never come back. "There was a raid," she said finally. 6 weeks ago. A group came down through the northern pass and hit the valley settlements hard. Burned fields, took livestock, killed 2 men who tried to fight back. They were gone before anyone could organize a pursuit. "I heard about that," Quinten said. "I was riding patrol on the eastern ridge that night. I saw fires in the valley, rode down to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the raiders were already gone. I tracked them as far as the pass, saw which way they went, and rode back to report. She took a drink, the ale bitter on her tongue. The elders decided I must have been involved, that I must have led them through because I knew the terrain. When I said I was on patrol, they said I was lying. When I showed them the patrol log with my route marked, they said I could have falsified it. When I asked them to send scouts to verify my story, they said it was too dangerous to waste resources on a traitor. So they exiled you. Took everything but what I could carry and told me to be grateful they did not execute me. Zara laughed, sharp and bitter. I served that clan for 8 years. Rode patrol in the worst weather, fought off bandits and predators, kept the borders safe. And the moment something went wrong, they needed someone to blame. Quinten was quiet for a long moment, turning his mug slowly in his hands. People are afraid, he said at last. Fear makes them stupid. It makes them cruel. That too. Zara looked at him, at the calm, weathered face, the steady gray eyes. You did not turn me away. No. Why not? Quinten shrugged. You needed help. I had a warm fire and a blanket. Did not seem complicated. Most people think it is. Most people spend too much time worrying about what the neighbors will say. He finished his ale and stood, setting the mug in the basin. You can stay as long as you need. Storm should break in a few days, but winter is long up here. If you want to wait it out before moving on, you are welcome. Zara felt that crack in her chest widen a little more, something warm and fragile spilling through. I can work, pay my way. I am good with animals, and I can hunt, repair things, whatever you need. I will not turn down help, Quinten said, but you do not owe me. Clear, clear. He nodded and headed for his room, pausing in the doorway. Good night, Zara. Good night. The storm blew itself out 3 days later, leaving the world buried under snowdrifts taller than Macy and a sky so blue and bright it hurt to look at. Quinten cleared a path to the barn and then to the road, and Zara helped him, shoveling until her shoulders burned and her breath came in great white clouds. Macy built a snow fort and declared herself queen of the mountain, demanding tribute in the form of extra cocoa. You are a tyrant, Quinten told her solemnly. What is a tyrant? Someone who demands extra cocoa. Macy considered this. Then I am a tyrant and I am good at it. Zara laughed, the sound strange in her own ears. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. That afternoon, Quinten showed her the barn loft, a cozy space under the eaves filled with hay and old blankets. It is not fancy, he said, but it is dry and warm and you will have privacy. It is perfect. She moved her things up that evening, arranging her small bundle of belongings in a corner, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something almost like peace. The days fell into a rhythm. Zara woke with the dawn, helped Quinten with the animals, chopped wood, hauled water, mended fences and tools. She was stronger than any human, her orc heritage showing in the way she could lift a full milk can with one hand or carry an anvil across the yard without breaking a sweat. And Quinten accepted it the same way he accepted everything else, with a calm nod and a quiet word of thanks. In the afternoons, Macy followed her around like a shadow, asking endless questions. What was it like being an orc? Did she have a big family? Could she teach Macy to track animals in the snow? Zara answered as best she could, and when Macy asked to learn tracking, she showed her how to read the prints left by rabbits and deer, how to tell fresh tracks from old, how to spot the places where a fox had paused to listen or a bird had taken flight. Macy was a quick study, bright and eager, and Zara found herself looking forward to their lessons. Quinten watched them sometimes, leaning against the fence or the barn door, his expression unreadable. But he never told Macy to stop, never pulled her away, and Zara took that as permission. One evening, after Macy had gone to bed, Zara asked the question that had been nagging at her since the first night. "Where is Macy's mother?" Quinten was sitting by the fire, whittling a small wooden horse. He did not look up. "Fever took her 2 years ago. We had a hard winter and she got sick, did not recover. I am sorry, so am I." He turned the horse over in his hands, checking the shape of it. "Macy was 3, barely remembers her. That must be hard." "It is." He set the horse aside and finally met her eyes. "But we manage." "You do what you have to." Zara thought about her own losses, the clan that had cast her out, the life she had built and lost. "Yes," she said quietly. "You do." The winter deepened and the snow piled higher. Quinten made a trip into the hamlet once a week to trade eggs and milk for flour and salt and other necessities. And Zara stayed at the farm with Macy, who chattered happily and never seemed to mind being left with an orc. When Quinten returned from those trips, he was quieter than usual, his jaw tight, and Zara did not ask what people said about her presence on his farm. She could guess. But he never told her to leave, and she stopped waiting for him to. She taught Macy to read the weather by the shape of the clouds, to recognize the calls of different birds, to move quietly through the forest without scaring the game. She showed her how to tie a dozen different knots, how to sharpen a knife properly, how to start a fire even in damp conditions. Quinten watched these lessons with something that might have been approval, and one night he handed Zara a worn leather journal filled with sketches and notes. "My grandfather's," he said. "He was a trapper, spent 50 years in these mountains. Thought you might find it interesting." Zara turned the pages carefully, studying the detailed drawings of animal tracks, the notes on migration patterns and denning sites, the maps of hidden trails and good hunting grounds. It was a treasure, the kind of knowledge that took a lifetime to gather. "This is wonderful," she said. "You can read," she glanced up, surprised. "Yes, my clan believed in education, reading, writing, mathematics. We were not savages, whatever your neighbors think." Quinten's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I did not think you were." The weeks passed, and winter settled into its deepest, coldest phase. The days were short, the nights long and bitter. The 3 of them spent their evenings by the fire, Quinten whittling or mending, Macy playing with her toys, Zara reading from the trapper's journal or helping Macy practice her letters. Quinten had started teaching his daughter to read, using a battered old book of folk tales, but Macy struggled with it, the letters swimming and reversing in ways that frustrated her. Zara had more patience, or perhaps just a different approach. She drew each letter large on the slate, traced it with Macy's finger, made up rhymes and stories to help her remember the shapes. Slowly, painstakingly, Macy began to improve. "You are good with her," Quinten said one night, after Macy had sounded out an entire sentence and then run off to bed, triumphant. "She is a good student. She likes you." Zara felt something warm and complicated twist in her chest. "I like her too." Quinten nodded, as if that settled something, and went back to his whittling. It was easy, Zara thought, to forget that this was temporary. That when the spring thaw came, she would have to move on, find some other place to start over. It was easy to pretend that she belonged here, in this warm house with this quiet man and his bright, curious daughter. It was dangerous. How easy it was. But she let herself have it anyway for now. The first real sign of trouble came in late winter, when a boy from the hamlet showed up at the farm, breathless and wide-eyed. He could not have been more than 10, skinny and shivering in a coat too thin for the weather. He skidded to a halt when he saw Zara in the yard, his eyes going huge. Quinten came out of the barn, saw the boy, and frowned. "Illy, what is wrong?" "My pa sent me," the boy stammered, still staring at Zara. "He said to tell you there has been strange tracks in the woods. Big group headed south. He thought you should know. What kind of tracks? Booted. Maybe a dozen men, maybe more. He said they did not look like hunters. Quinten's frown deepened. All right, thank your father for me. The boy nodded, turned to run, then paused. My pa also said, he added, hesitant, that you should be careful, having that one around. He jerked his chin toward Zara. People are saying she might have called her friends back. Zara went very still. Quinten crossed the yard in 3 long strides, his voice sharp. You can tell the people who are saying that to mind their own business. Zara has been here all winter, working harder than half the men in that hamlet, and she has done nothing but help. If they have a problem with her, they can come tell me to my face. The boy flinched. Yes, sir, I will tell them. He ran. Quinten watched him go, his jaw tight, then turned to Zara. Ignore it. Hard to ignore when they think I am plotting another raid. They are scared, looking for someone to blame. They already blamed me once, I know. Quinten met her eyes, steady and certain. But I do not, and I am the one who matters here. The warmth in Zara's chest flared so bright it hurt. That night she could not sleep. She lay in the loft, staring at the dark beams overhead, and thought about those tracks. A dozen men headed south. It could be nothing. Trappers, traders, drifters. Or it could be the raiders, come back to finish what they started, and if they did, the hamlet would blame her. Again, she thought about leaving, packing her things and slipping away before dawn, before she could bring more trouble down on Quinten and Macy. It would be the smart thing to do. The safe thing. But when morning came, she was still there, and Quinten handed her a mug of cocoa and a biscuit, and Macy wanted to go check the rabbit snares they had set in the woods. So she stayed. The tracks in the woods worried Quinten more than he let on. Zara could see it in the way he checked the windows before bed, the way he kept his hunting bow strung and ready by the door. He did not say anything, but she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. If the raiders came back, the hamlet would need proof that she was not involved. And proof was hard to come by when everyone had already decided you were guilty. 3 days later, Quinten came back from the hamlet with a grim expression and a sack of flour that he dropped on the table harder than necessary. What happened? Zara asked. The Hendersons got hit last night. Someone broke into their barn, took a cow and half their winter stores. Zara's stomach sank. Did they see who? No, but they are saying it was orcs. Quinten looked at her, his eyes hard. They are saying you were scouting for them. I have been here the whole time. I know. I told them that. They do not care. Macy, sitting by the fire with her slate, looked up. Why are people being mean to Zara? Because they are scared, sweetheart, Quinten said quietly, and scared people do not always think clearly. That is stupid. Yes, Quinten agreed. It is. Zara stood, her hands clenched into fists. If the raiders are back, I need to help stop them. That is the only way to prove I am not working with them. You also need to not get killed by a mob, Quinten pointed out. Half the men in the hamlet are talking about riding up here and running you off, or worse. Let them try. Zara. She turned, met his eyes, saw the worry there, the genuine fear, and felt something in her chest twist. I will not bring trouble to your door, she said quietly. If it comes to that, I will leave. That is not what I want. What do you want? Quinten was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, I want you to stay safe, and I want people to stop being idiots, but I do not get to control either of those things. Zara thought about the blizzard, the doors slamming in her face, the cold that had nearly killed her. She thought about the warmth of this house, the kindness of this man, the sound of Macy's laughter. I will be careful, she said, but I am not running. Quinten nodded slowly. All right. Then we find proof. Real proof that even the idiots cannot ignore. How? We start with those tracks Ellie's father saw. If the raiders are moving through the area, they will leave a trail. We follow it, see where it leads, and we find something that ties them to the raids. something solid. That could take days, weeks. Then we had better get started. The next morning they set out together, leaving Macy with a neighbor woman who owed Quinten a favor and was willing to overlook his choice in house guests. The woman gave Zara a hard look but said nothing, and Macy hugged them both fiercely before letting them go. The forest was deep with snow, silent and still. Quinten led the way, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent his whole life in these mountains, and Zara followed, her eyes scanning the ground for signs. They found the tracks an hour into their hike, a clear line of boot prints cutting through the trees. Quinten crouched beside them, studying the pattern. "At least 15 men," he said. "Heavily loaded, see how deep the prints are," Zara nodded. "They are moving carefully, avoiding the roads, because they do not want to be seen." They followed the trail south, through dense thickets and across frozen streams, moving as quickly as the snow allowed. The tracks led them deeper into the mountains, away from the settled areas, and Zara felt a cold knot of dread forming in her gut. She knew this area, had patrolled it back when she still had a clan. Late in the afternoon they found the camp, a crude shelter tucked into a ravine, hidden from casual view, with the remains of a fire still smoking faintly. Zara approached carefully, her hand on her knife, but the place was deserted. Whoever had been here was gone, but they had left things behind. Quinten poked through the ashes, then froze. "Zara, look at this." She crossed to his side and he held up a scrap of leather, charred at the edges but still recognizable, a brand. Burned into the leather in a distinctive pattern, 2 crossed axes over a crescent moon. "That is the Henderson mark," Quinten said quietly, "from the cow they stole." Zara stared at the brand, her heart pounding. "This proves the raiders were here, that they took the Henderson cow." "It proves someone took the cow. We need to prove it was not you." "How? I was not here. I was at your farm." Quinten looked around the camp, his eyes sharp. Then he moved to the edge of the ravine, studying the tracks that led away. "How many orcs do you see?" he asked. Zara blinked, then looked more closely at the prints. They were all human-sized, human-patterned. No claw marks, no heavy tread of orc boots. "None," she said slowly. "Right. These are all human raiders. Which means either they are working without orcs, or the orcs are very good at hiding their tracks. Or the orcs were never involved in the first place." Quinten nodded. "We need to take this back. Show the blacksmith, the elders. Make them look at the evidence. They will not believe it. They will say I planted it. Maybe. But it is a start." They gathered the brand, along with a few other items from the camp. A broken knife with an unfamiliar maker's mark, a scrap of cloth that did not match anything from the local settlements. Small things, but together they painted a picture. By the time they made it back to the hamlet, the sun was setting, and Quinten's neighbor was waiting with Macy, who launched herself at her father the moment she saw him. "Did you find the bad people?" she demanded. "We found where they were," Quinten said, "not the people themselves." "Are they gone?" "For now." Zara saw the relief in the neighbor woman's face, quickly hidden. She did not offer to take Macy again, and Zara did not blame her. The next morning, Quinten gathered several of the hamlet's leaders, the blacksmith, the miller, a farmer named Henderson who had lost his cow, and old Marta, who served as the informal headwoman. They met in the blacksmith's forge, a neutral space, and Quinten laid out the evidence on the workbench. "This is the Henderson brand," he said, pointing to the leather scrap. "We found it in a raider camp 3 miles south of here, along with these." He set down the knife, the cloth, the other small items. Henderson picked up the brand, his face grim. "That is mine, no question." "The camp was full of human tracks," Quinten continued. "No orcs, no sign that orcs were ever involved." The blacksmith crossed his arms. "So you are saying we were wrong, That the orc girl had nothing to do with the raids. I am saying the evidence points that way. Or she is just smart enough to cover her tracks. Zara, standing in the doorway, stepped forward. I was at Quinten's farm the night the Hendersons were raided. I was there all night. He can confirm it. Of course he can, the blacksmith said. He has been sheltering you, feeding you. For all we know, you have him under some kind of spell. That is enough, Quinten said, his voice sharp. Zara has worked harder than anyone to help find these raiders. She has done nothing but prove herself, and you are too stubborn to see it. I see a man who has gotten too close to something dangerous, the blacksmith shot back. And I see a community that is tired of being raided. Then help us catch the real raiders, Zara said, instead of wasting time blaming me. Old Marta, who had been silent until now, held up a hand. Peace. Fighting amongst ourselves helps no one. She picked up the knife, turned it over in her gnarled fingers. This is not local work. The mark is unfamiliar. Could be from the southern valleys, Henderson said, or farther. Which means the raiders are not from here, Quinten said. They are outsiders, possibly the same group that hit 6 weeks ago. Possibly, Marta agreed, but possibly is not proof. What would be proof? Zara asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. Catching them in the act, the blacksmith said flatly, or finding someone who saw them. A witness who can confirm it was humans, not orcs. Zara thought about the camp, the tracks, the careful way the raiders had moved. They were good, disciplined. They would not leave witnesses easily, but maybe, just maybe, they already had. Ellie's father saw the tracks, she said slowly. Before the Henderson raid, he sent Ellie to warn Quinten. He might have seen more. Quinten straightened. Ellie lives on the western edge of the hamlet. If the raiders came through, he might have gotten a look at them. Then we talked to him, Marta said. And if he saw something useful, we plan accordingly. The meeting broke up, the men filing out in silence, and Zara caught the blacksmith watching her with cold, suspicious eyes. She met his gaze evenly, refusing to flinch, and after a moment he turned away. Quinten touched her elbow. Come on. Let us go find Ellie's father. They walked through the hamlet together, and Zara felt the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation that stopped when they passed. She kept her head up, her shoulders back, and tried not to let it bother her. Ellie's father, a lean, grizzled man named Thomas, met them at his door with a wary expression. But when Quinten explained what they needed, he nodded slowly. I did see them, he said. Night before the Henderson raid. I was out checking my traps and I heard voices. Hid in the brush and watched them pass. How many? Quinten asked. 15, maybe 20. All men, all armed. They were moving quiet like they knew what they were doing. Any orcs? Zara asked. Thomas shook his head. Not a one, all human. I got a good look at a few of them. One had a scar across his face, another was missing part of his ear. Rough types. Would you be willing to tell that to the elders? Quinten pressed. To the blacksmith, Thomas hesitated, his eyes flicking to Zara. I do not want trouble. Neither do we, Quinten said. But if we do not stop these raiders, they will keep coming back, and people will keep blaming Zara for something she did not do. Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right, I will tell them, but if it gets me run out of town, I am blaming you, Quinten. Fair enough. They gathered the leaders again that evening, and Thomas told his story. The blacksmith listened with a scowl, but he did not interrupt, and when Thomas finished, Marta nodded thoughtfully. That matches what we found at the camp, she said. Human raiders, outsiders, well armed. So what do? Henderson asked. We set a watch, Quinten said. Post lookouts on the main trails, especially the southern approaches. If they come back, we will see them coming. And then what? The blacksmith demanded. Then we stop them, together. The blacksmith looked at Zara, his jaw tight. And her? What is her part in this? Same as anyone else, Quinten said flatly. She fights. She is probably the best tracker in this room, and she is stronger than any of us. We would be stupid not to use her." Zara felt a flicker of surprise. Quinten had never been one for long speeches, but there was a steel in his voice now that brooked no argument. The blacksmith did not look happy, but he nodded grudgingly. "Fine. But if this goes wrong, it will not," Quinten interrupted. "Not if we work together." They set the watches that night, and Zara volunteered for the first shift, paired with a young farmer who looked terrified but did not protest. They stationed themselves on a ridge overlooking the southern trail, wrapped in heavy cloaks, and waited. The night was cold and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. Zara watched the forest, her eyes and ears straining for any sign of movement, and the young farmer huddled beside her, his breath fogging in the air. "You really did not have anything to do with the raids?" he asked after a while, his voice small. "Really," Zara said. "Then why did they blame you?" "Because I was convenient, and because people would rather believe I am a monster than admit they do not know who the real enemy is." The farmer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "For what it is worth, I do not think you are a monster." Zara glanced at him, surprised. "Thank you." "My sister is married to a half-orc," he added. "Good man. Works hard, takes care of his family. People gave them trouble at first, but they settled down eventually." "That is good to hear. People are stupid when they are scared," the farmer said, "but most of them come around given time." Zara hoped he was right. The night passed without incident, and the next day Quinten took the second watch with Thomas. Zara stayed at the farm with Macy, who was full of questions about the raiders and whether they were going to attack. "We will not let them hurt anyone," Zara promised. "Are you going to fight them, if I have to?" Macy looked at her seriously. "You are very strong." "I saw you carry the anvil. I am." "Will you teach me to be strong like you?" Zara smiled. "Strength is not just about muscles, Macy. It is about being brave when you are scared, standing up for what is right even when it is hard. Like what Papa is doing. Letting you stay even though people are mean about it." "Exactly like that." Macy nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawings. The watches continued for a week, then two. The hamlet settled into an uneasy routine, and Zara began to hope that maybe the raiders had moved on, found easier targets elsewhere. But then, on a cold, clear morning, the lookout on the southern ridge came running into the hamlet, shouting that there were men in the woods. A lot of men. Quinten grabbed his bow, and Zara slung her quiver over her shoulder, and they ran for the ridge together. By the time they arrived, a dozen men from the hamlet had gathered, armed with whatever they could find. Axes, hunting bows, a few old swords. The blacksmith was there, his face grim. "How many?" "20, maybe more," the lookout panted. "Heading this way." "Are they trying to hide?" Zara asked. "Not anymore. Moving fast like they do not care who sees them." That was bad. It meant they were confident or desperate. Quinten looked at the gathered men. "We need to slow them down. Give the families time to barricade themselves in." "How?" Henderson asked. "We set up a choke point," Zara said, thinking fast. "There is a narrow pass about half a mile south. If we block it, they will have to go around, and that will buy us time." "Or they will just fight their way through," the blacksmith said. "Then we fight," Quinten said simply. "But we do it on our terms, not theirs." The men moved quickly, dragging fallen logs and piling rocks to create a rough barricade across the pass. It would not stop a determined force, but it would slow them down, and that was all they needed. Zara took a position on the ridge above the pass, her bow ready, and Quinten crouched beside her, his own bow strung. The other men spread out along the barricade, their faces pale but determined. They did not have to wait long. The raiders came through the trees like wolves, moving fast and low, their weapons glinting in the pale sunlight. Zara counted 23, all men, all armed with swords and axes and mean expressions. At the front, a tall man with a scar across his face called a halt, staring at the barricade. "That is one of the men Thomas saw," Quinten murmured. Zara nodded, her fingers tightening on her bow. The scarred man shouted something to his companions and they fanned out, looking for a way around. Zara waited, her heart pounding, until one of them came into clear view. Then she loosed. The arrow took the raider in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry of pain. The others scattered, diving for cover, and Quinten fired a heartbeat later, his arrow burying itself in a tree trunk inches from another raider's head. "They are up on the ridge," someone shouted, and the raiders turned their attention upward, arrows and thrown axes hissing through the air. Zara rolled behind a boulder, her breath coming fast, and fired again, this time hitting a raider in the leg. Beside her, Quinten shot methodically, each arrow finding its mark or coming close enough to keep the raiders pinned. Below, the men at the barricade held their ground, shouting insults and challenges, and for a few desperate minutes, it looked like they might actually hold. Then the scarred man bellowed an order, and the raiders charged. They hit the barricade like a wave, scrambling over the logs and rocks, and the hamlet men met them with axes and swords. The sound of fighting filled the air, metal on metal, shouts and screams, and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. Zara slung her bow and drew her knives, leaping down from the ridge. She landed in the middle of the fight, her blades flashing, and the raiders recoiled, their eyes wide. "An orc," one of them shouted. "They said there was no orcs." Surprise, Zara snarled and drove her knife into his gut. She fought like a storm, all fury and precision, and the raiders fell back before her. Quinten was at her side a moment later, his hunting knife in one hand and a broken axe handle in the other, and together they carved a path through the chaos. The blacksmith fought with a hammer, his blows heavy and brutal. Thomas wielded a woodcutter's axe, his face set in grim determination. Henderson used a pitchfork, jabbing and thrusting, keeping the raiders at bay, but there were too many. For every raider they dropped, two more pressed forward, and Zara knew they could not hold much longer. Then she saw him, the scarred man hanging back, directing his fighters. The leader. If they could take him down, the others might break. "Quinten," she shouted, pointing. He saw, nodded, and they moved together, cutting through the press of bodies. The scarred man saw them coming and grinned, drawing a long, wicked sword. "So you are the orc they have been crying about," he said. "Funny, you do not look like much." "You talk too much," Zara said, and lunged. They fought in a vicious, brutal exchange, steel ringing on steel. The scarred man was good, better than she expected, but Zara was faster, stronger, and she had something he did not. She was fighting for her home. Quinten circled around, looking for an opening, and when the scarred man overextended on a thrust, he took it, driving his knife into the man's side. The scarred man howled, staggered, and Zara swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, and she put her knife to his throat. "Call them off," she said. He spat blood. "Go to hell, call them off, or I finish this." The scarred man looked at her, at the cold determination in her eyes, and something in him broke. "Fall back," he shouted. "Fall back." The raiders hesitated, looking at their fallen leader, and then they broke, scrambling back through the trees. A few of the hamlet men started to give chase, but Quinten called them back. "Let them go." "We held." The men lowered their weapons, panting, bloodied but alive. Zara stood over the scarred man, her knife still at his throat, and looked at the blacksmith. "Still think I led them?" she asked. The blacksmith stared at her, at the bodies of the raiders scattered across the ground, at the scarred man whimpering beneath her blade. "No," he said at last. "I do not." Zara stepped back, sheathing her knife, and the scarred man curled into a ball, clutching his bleeding side. They bound the wounded raiders and marched them back to the hamlet, where Marta and the other elders waited. Thomas told his story again, and this time, everyone listened. The scarred man offered leniency in exchange for information, admitted that his group had been raiding settlements all across the region, and that they had never worked with orcs. "We spread the rumor," he said bitterly. "Figured it would keep people scared and confused, make them easier to hit." The blacksmith looked at Zara, his face hard. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me more than that," Zara said, "but it is a start." Over the next few days, the hamlet rallied. They sent word to the regional militia, who came and took the captured raiders away to face justice. They repaired the damage to the Henderson farm and the other places that had been hit, everyone pitching in to help. And slowly, grudgingly, they began to accept Zara. It was not immediate. Some people still crossed the street when they saw her coming, still whispered behind her back. But others nodded when they passed, or offered a quiet word of thanks, and that was more than she had dared to hope for. Quinten, for his part, said nothing. But when they walked back to the farm that evening, Macy between them holding both their hands, Zara saw the way he looked at her, and she felt something warm and hopeful unfurl in her chest. Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow melting in fits and starts, revealing the green world beneath. Zara helped Quinten prepare the fields for planting, turning the soil and mending fences, and Macy chased butterflies and collected wildflowers, her laughter bright in the cool air. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Quinten said quietly, "You do not have to leave, you know." Zara glanced at him. "What? When the road's clear, you do not have to move on." He kept his eyes on the horizon, his voice careful. "You could stay if you wanted." Zara's heart stuttered. "Quinten, I know it is a lot to ask," he continued. "And I know you probably have other plans, places you want to go, things you want to do, but Macy loves you, and he stopped, swallowed. "I would like it if you stayed." Zara looked at him, at the strong, quiet man who had opened his door on the worst night of her life, and handed her cocoa and a blanket without asking for anything in return. Who had stood beside her when the whole hamlet turned against her, who had fought for her, believed in her, made her feel like she belonged. "I would like that too," she said softly. Quinten turned to her, and the look in his gray eyes was warm and open and full of something that made her breath catch. "Good," he said. "Then it is settled." Macy, who had been lying in the grass nearby, sat up. "Does that mean Zara is staying forever, if she wants to?" Quinten said. Macy launched herself at Zara, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Yes, you have to stay. Who will teach me to track rabbits if you leave?" Zara hugged her back, her eyes stinging. "I suppose I cannot leave then." "No," Macy agreed solemnly. "You cannot." That night, after Macy had gone to bed, Quinten and Zara sat by the fire, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I was not sure you would say yes," he admitted. "I was not sure you would ask." "I am not very good at this," Quinten said, "talking about feelings. Saying what I mean." "You do all right." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that made him look younger. "I am glad you are here, Zara. I do not think I realized how lonely it was before you came. Just me and Macy. It is better now with you." Zara felt her throat tighten. "It is better for me too. I did not think I would find a place like this again. People who cared." "We care," Quinten said quietly. "Both of us. Very much." She met his eyes, and the air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something fragile and new. Slowly, carefully, Quinten reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm and rough from work, and they curled around hers with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "Is this all right?" he asked. "Yes." They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. The weeks turned into months, and the snow melted away completely, leaving the mountains green and vibrant. Zara planted a garden beside the house, neat rows of vegetables and herbs, and Macy helped, digging holes and planting seeds with serious concentration. Quinten watched them from the porch, carving a new set of wooden animals for Macy's collection, and sometimes Zara would catch him smiling, and she would smile back. The hamlet slowly warmed to her. Henderson invited her to help with the spring shearing, and she spent a week wrestling sheep and learning to use the big shears. Old Marta asked her to teach a class on tracking for the children, and Zara found herself surrounded by a dozen curious kids, all asking questions at once. The blacksmith never quite apologized, but he nodded when they passed, and once he left a new set of horseshoes on Quinten's porch with a note that said only, "For the plow horse." It was not friendship, but it was respect, and that was enough. One warm evening in early summer, Quinten asked Zara to walk with him. They left Macy with Thomas and his wife, who had grown fond of the girl, and climbed the ridge above the farm, where the view stretched out for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Quinten stood at the edge of the ridge, looking out over the valley. "I used to come up here with my wife," he said quietly. "Before she got sick, we would watch the sunset and talk about what we wanted to do with the farm. The life we wanted to build." Zara stood beside him, waiting. "She would have liked you," Quinten continued. "She always said I was too serious, that I needed someone who would challenge me, make me think." "I am glad she had good taste," Zara said lightly. Quinten huffed a quiet laugh. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what comes next for all of us." And he turned to her, and his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. "I want you to stay, not just as a friend or a farmhand. I want you to be part of this family for real." Zara's breath caught. "Quinten, I know it is complicated," he said quickly. "I know people will talk and it will not be easy, but I do not care. I have spent the last 2 years alone raising Macy, trying to keep everything together, and then you showed up and everything got better. You make me better. You make Macy happy, and he stopped, took a breath. "I love you, Zara. I think I have for a while now, I just did not know how to say it." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. She had not cried in years, not since the exile, but now they came hot and fast, spilling down her cheeks. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I did not think I would ever have this. A home, a family, someone who saw me, really saw me, and did not run." Quinten reached out, cupping her face in his hands, and wiped the tears away with his thumbs. "I see you," he said, "and I am not running." He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Zara kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment, this man, this impossible, wonderful life. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Quinten rested his forehead against hers. "So you will stay?" he asked. "Yes," Zara said, "I will stay." They walked back to the farm hand in hand, and when they arrived, Macy took one look at them and grinned. "You kissed," she announced. "How do you know that?" Quinten asked. "Because you are both smiling funny, and Zara has been crying." "I have not," Zara started, then laughed. "All right. Yes, we kissed." Macy clapped her hands. "Does that mean you are going to get married?" Quinten and Zara looked at each other. They had not talked about that, not yet, but the idea hung in the air between them, sweet and terrifying. "Maybe," Quinten said. "Someday, soon," Macy insisted. "Because I want Zara to be my real mother, not just my friend." Zara knelt down, pulling Macy into a hug. "I will always be here for you," she said. "No matter what, I promise." Macy hugged her back fiercely. "Good." As summer deepened, the farm thrived. The crops grew tall and green, the animals were healthy, and Macy sprouted like a weed, her reading improving every day. Zara and Quinten fell into an easy partnership, working side by side, talking late into the night, stealing kisses when Macy was not looking. The hamlet had a midsummer festival, and for the first time, Zara was invited. She hesitated, worried about how people would react, but Quinten took her hand and said, "We go together. As a family." So they went, the three of them, and while some people still stared, most did not. The children swarmed Macy, begging her to show them the tracking tricks Zara had taught her, and Henderson invited Zara to try her hand at the archery contest. She won easily, and the blacksmith grudgingly handed over the prize. A new skinning knife, beautifully balanced. "You earned it," he said gruffly. "Thank you." That night, as they walked home under the stars, Macy between them again, Quinten said, "I think we should do it." "Do what?" "Get married, make it official." Zara stopped walking, her heart skipping. "Are you asking me?" "I am." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "I do not have a ring or a fancy speech, but I know what I want. I want you, forever, if you will have me." Zara looked at him, at this quiet, steady man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it, who had stood beside her when no one else would, who had fought for her, believed in her, loved her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Macy whooped and danced in circles around them, and Quinten pulled Zara into his arms and kissed her breathless. They were married a month later, in a simple ceremony on the ridge above the farm. Marta officiated, and Thomas and his wife stood as witnesses, and Macy wore a crown of wildflowers and declared herself the flower princess. The blacksmith gave them a set of iron fire tools as a wedding gift, and Henderson brought a cask of his best cider. Old Marta gave them a quilt she had stitched herself, the pattern intricate and beautiful. It was small and quiet and perfect. That night, lying in bed with Quinten's arm around her and the sound of Macy's soft breathing from the next room, Zara felt a peace she had never known. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For opening the door. For the cocoa and the blanket. For seeing me when everyone else saw a monster." Quinten kissed her temple. "Thank you for staying, for giving us a chance. I would not be anywhere else." Autumn came, and with it, the preparations for winter. Zara and Quinten worked together to bring in the harvest, filling the root cellar with potatoes and turnips and carrots, hanging onions and garlic from the rafters. Macy helped, carrying baskets and sorting apples, her cheeks flushed with the cold. One crisp October morning, Quinten announced that it was time for Macy's naming day celebration. The farm had a new foal, a leggy chestnut filly born just the week before, and tradition held that a child who named a foal would have good luck all year. Macy took the responsibility very seriously. She spent hours in the barn watching the foal, studying her before finally announcing, "Her name is Copper, because she is shiny." "Copper is a good name," Zara agreed. They invited the neighbors for a small celebration. Cider and cakes, music and laughter. Thomas brought his fiddle and they danced in the yard, Macy spinning between them, her face bright with joy. As the sun set and the guests began to drift home, Quinten pulled Zara aside. "I have been thinking," he said. "Dangerous," Zara teased. He smiled. "I never said it properly. When I asked you to stay all those months ago, I should have told you then." "Told me what?" "That I was already in love with you, that you had become the most important part of my life. That I could not imagine waking up without you there." Zara felt her throat tighten. "You showed me," she said softly, "every day in 100 small ways. I know, but I wanted to say it too because you deserve to hear it." She kissed him, slow and deep, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude, love, hope, joy. When they finally pulled apart, Macy was standing a few feet away, watching them with a knowing grin. "You are kissing again," she said. Yes, Quinten said, not looking away from Zara. We are. Macy shrugged. That is all right, I like it when you are happy. We are, Zara said, reaching out to pull her into a hug. Very, very happy. The three of them stood there in the fading light, wrapped in each other's arms, and Zara thought about the night she had stumbled through the blizzard, frozen and desperate, certain she was going to die. She thought about the door opening, the cocoa and the blanket, the quiet man who had seen her not as a monster but as someone who needed help. She thought about the life they had built together, the love that had grown slow and steady, rooted deep. And she thought about the future stretching out ahead of them, full of possibility. I am home, she whispered. Quinten tightened his arms around her. Yes, he said. You are. Winter came again, as it always did, but this time Zara faced it without fear. The storms could howl all they wanted. She had a fire to keep her warm, cocoa to drink, a family to hold close. She had everything she needed. Macy grew another inch and learned to write her name in careful, crooked letters. Quinten built a new chicken coop and repaired the plow. Zara hunted and trapped, bringing in meat and furs to trade, and in the evenings they sat by the fire together, telling stories and making plans. The hamlet, once hostile, had become something like home. Not perfect, not without its rough edges, but theirs. And when spring came again, bringing warmth and new life, Zara planted her garden and smiled at the sight of green shoots pushing up through the soil. She had survived the storm. She had found shelter, love, a place to belong, and she would never take it for granted. Years passed in the way they do, each season blending into the next. Macy grew tall and strong, her tracking skills sharp enough to put most hunters to shame. She helped with the farm, learned to read and write fluently, and announced one day that she wanted to be a ranger, just like Zara. Quinten built her a small bow and taught her to shoot, and Zara taught her the rest. How to move through the forest unseen, how to read the wind, how to survive. The farm prospered. Quinten's reputation as a skilled farmer spread, and people came from miles around to buy his seed stock and ask his advice. Zara's reputation as a tracker and hunter grew as well, and she found herself hired to guide hunting parties and track down lost livestock. It was a good life, a full life. And when Zara looked at Quinten across the dinner table, or watched Macy practice her archery in the yard, she felt a gratitude so deep it bordered on pain. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Quinten said, "Do you ever miss it? Your old life?" Zara considered. "Sometimes I miss the clan, the people I knew before they turned on me, but I do not miss the life. It was hard and lonely, and I never felt like I truly belonged. And now," she took his hand, lacing their fingers together, "now I belong, here with you with Macy. This is my clan." Quinten smiled. Good. They sat in comfortable silence, the sky turning from gold to pink to purple, and Zara thought about the girl she had been, stumbling through the blizzard, desperate and alone. She thought about how far she had come and how much she had gained. And she thought about the man beside her, who had changed everything with a simple act of kindness. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Macy came out onto the porch, flopping down between them. "Are we having a moment?" she asked. "We are always having a moment," Quinten said dryly. Macy grinned. "I know, that is why I like it here." Zara ruffled her hair. "We like having you here too." They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, bright and cold against the deepening sky, and when they finally went inside, Zara felt the same warmth she always did when she crossed the threshold. This was home. This was family. This was everything she had ever wanted, even when she had not known to want it. And as she lay down beside Quinten that night, his arm warm and solid around her, she whispered a quiet thank you to whatever gods or fate had led her to this door, this man, this life. She had been the storm everyone fled. But he had handed her cocoa and a blanket, and in doing so had given her the world.